morning, and welcome to The Grim. I'm your host, Kristen. On today's episode, we'll be opening the gate and entering Union Cemetery, located in Easton, Connecticut. So grab your favorite mug, cozy up, and let's take a dig into history. During October, everyone loves a little bit of Halloween. Scary movies, activities, and tales of hauntings intrigue millions. As summer fades and friends find themselves around bonfires, ghost stories come alive. But are they just stories? For Union Cemetery and its townfolk, to some they're very real, especially two residents who lived nearby in Monroe, Connecticut, Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens, now famous in the paranormal community for being pioneers as ghost hunters, took a keen interest in Union Cemetery, putting it on the world map for one of the most haunted cemeteries in America and possibly the world. Union was established around 1761-ish. The oldest tombstone in the grounds is dated then, but historians believe it's far older. The cemetery sits on 5.2 acres of land in the beautiful New England countryside that gives visitors the feeling history was made here. The cemetery at one time was known as the Old Cemetery and the Baptist Cemetery, but no one quite is certain when it was renamed Union. The permanent residents of Union are more of an array from history ranging from 400 years ago to its recently interred. Soldiers from the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and World War II can be found among the interred. There isn't any bigwig soldiers or names from wars within Union Cemetery that might cause many to surpass its significance, but it's a good reminder that America was founded and built from ordinary people who did extraordinary things for their country, leaving the comforts of civilization and deciding to create their own in a very wild land. Easton, where Union Cemetery sits, is a very rural setting that leaves the impression to visitors that not much has changed throughout the years in the town. Within is one famous resident who, despite a rock and roll career, he finds himself competing with a notorious resident ghost. Johnny Winters III, or more commonly known as Johnny Winters, was an American singer, guitarist, songwriter, and record producer. Born in Texas, Winters is a Grammy Award-winning musician who contributed to the blues significantly in his career. Coming from a family of musicians, he started out with his brother in a local children's show, playing a ukulele at 10 years old. Then 5 years later, at 15, recorded his first album with his band, Johnny and the Jammers, with a Houston record label. Winters was heavily influenced by classic blues artists such as Muddy Waters, B.B. King, and Bobby Bland, who were popular at this time. It wasn't until years later, in 1968, he would finally get his big break. After a jam session in Chicago, he met with another artist, Mike Bloomfield, in which caused Bloomfield to invite Winters to the Bloomfield and Al concert at the Fillmore East in New York City. It was here that representatives of Columbia Records saw Winters perform and singing B.B. King's It's My Own Fault, and he left quite the impression. Days later, he was signed with, at the time, was the largest advance of $600,000 in the recording industry. Winters went on to enjoy a lengthy career, even having a brief affair with Janis Joplin at one time. He would go on to produce 3 Grammy Award-winning albums for blues singer and guitarist McKinley Morganfield, or professionally known as Muddy Waters, fulfilling his childhood dream of performing with a legend. Winters then seemed to be on a roll and created several Grammy-nominated blues albums. Sadly, along with his fame, addiction came with it, with Winters suffering sinking into heroin. He, however, sought treatment and thankfully fully recovered from the addiction. Later on in his career, he again saw troubles, but was sadly abused by his manager, Teddy Slattis, who used his past and kept giving the musician methadone to quiet his complaints about not being paid. This lasted from 1984 till 2005, but after being unable to talk or even play anymore, Paul Nelson took control. Nelson slowly helped Winters cure his addiction and also slowly eased him off smoking and drinking too. While still playing and professionally performing, Winters passed away suddenly on July 16th in 2014 near Zurich, Switzerland. His cause of death wasn't officially released, but according to Nelson, he passed from emphysema combined with pneumonia. In 1998, he was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame, becoming the first non-African American performer to be inducted. The Rolling Stone ranked him as the 63rd of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. Many guitarists say Winters influenced their work. The Smashing Pumpkins dedicated a song on an album to Winters called A Tribute to Johnny. What's hard about Union Cemetery is the interred include founders of the area and also its most other recent residents. It's a richly filled cemetery with history that not much history seems to be written about. Yet the hauntings and happenings are plentiful and all anyone ever seems to talk about. Then again, when you have the Warrens coming and going throughout the years investigating the grounds, it's bound to be the main topic. If you're not too familiar with Ed and Lorraine Warren, I'll share a little insight, but they also aren't without their controversy too. The Lorens were legendary American paranormal investigators who took on prominent hauntings that gave them considerable fame in their time and even now after. Possessing a library of thousands of cases that inspired books and films like The Conjuring and more, a franchise that, although prominent in the horror film world, is based on real-life events from their investigations. Proclaiming or saying that you have methods of proving ghosts exist in a world filled with believers, skeptics, and a lot of science, it's incredibly hard though. Everyone wants their say. In my honest opinion, it's really up to you personally, the listener, on what you believe, feel, and choose to acknowledge as the facts in the situation. The Warrens put Union Cemetery on the map as a hotspot for paranormal activity, so sharing their findings in this episode is absolutely a key part of Union, I feel. The investigation of Union for the Warrens wasn't just a one-time ordeal of claims saying, oh hey, we found something. I think I should also add. In fact, it ended up as part of the inspiration for a book called Graveyard, True Hauntings from an Old New England Cemetery by the famous paranormal couple. Not only that, but Union residents seem to also have run-ins with the hauntings of the cemetery that seem to turn skeptics into believers. A town straight out of a storybook picture in rural New England, Easton seems to be a fantastic place to live, but hidden near its burial ground, it isn't so picturesque after all. It's filled with sightings, sounds, and a lot more. When you look at the town's past unfortunate happenings, they actually seem to be pretty common for a small town with less than 7,600 people in it, with many incidents happening around Union Cemetery. Blending into the graves is the gravesite of Harriet R. Seeley that can be found within. Looking like your ordinary grave, Harriet was born in 1825, but tragically died at the age of 27 in 1853. Not much is known of Harriet's life, but in 1853, she gave birth to a baby boy, then due to complications passed away days later. Not ready to leave our world, Harriet is believed to be one of the souls sighted within the grounds, searching for her newborn child, forever cursed to not find him. Many offer her coins while visiting her grave and hope Harriet one day will finally pass on to be reunited with her baby boy. Sadly, many women within Union Cemetery died under the age of 30, and many children under the age of 5 graves can be found. It tells the tragic reality of how common death in childbirth was during the time. To add confusion to who might be haunting Union Cemetery, another Harriet Seeley is also within, who tragically died just 9 days after her wedding, then known as Harriet Seeley Bryan. Some speculation that due to diseases such as cholera being prevalent at the time of her death in Connecticut, this may have been the cause for her passing so quickly. However, no evidence exists to confirm this claim. Many times, both are confused for each other and their tales are intertwined by accident. No one's quite sure if both haunt the grounds or if it's just one of the Harriets. Perhaps one day we'll know, but for now, both are rumored to be haunting Union. One of Union's most famous sightings is of a woman deemed the White Lady. Not too picky about who sees her, she appears to neighboring children, materializes on the road near the cemetery in front of passing drivers, and glides toward visitors in the cemetery. Around the 90s, a firefighter responding to a call from Monroe drove by the cemetery. He claimed a woman rolled over the hood and the top of his car, landing on the road behind him. Leaping from his car to give aid, he found no one in sight, but he was left with a dent in his car confirming he didn't imagine the counter at all. For those who've encountered her, describe her as a young woman with long black hair, dressed in a bygone-era gown illuminated by a shimmering light while glowing orbs of light and dark shapes surround her. Many believe her dress is a wedding gown with a veil or perhaps a bonnet. No one, not even the Warrens after all their investigations, are quite sure who she might be. Many believe she's one of the Harriets who died young and perhaps Harriet Seeley Bryan, giving a good reason for the wedding dress apparel and why she might not have been fully ready to leave the land of the living, due to her youth and with her life still ahead of her as a newlywed. The other famous ghost or claims of union is Red Eyes. Visitors report seeing red eyes sometimes peering at people within the grounds from the bushes. The ghost, however, has been debunked as red reflectors that locals or someone is moving around the cemetery as a prank to scare visitors away or add intrigue falsely. To add to the unfortunate incidents near or right across the street of Union Cemetery, one is of the Burning Man. Believed to be Earl Kellogg, he was set on fire across the street of Union Cemetery in 1935. Kellogg doesn't haunt the grounds or across the street, but his story has been intertwined with Union for a good reason. Some say Union Cemetery might not be cursed, but the land around it sure is. Reports of several residents of Easton seeing a dark figure, then committing hideous acts, such as Earl Kellogg being burned to death, happened way too often to not have some speculation. The story of Kellogg starts with a couple who were keepers of an inn in nearby Monroe. The wife was a kind and loving woman, but her husband was the exact opposite. Full of jealousy and prone to fights, he quickly took a dislike to Earl Kellogg, a local mechanic. A few stories have different versions that the husband saw Kellogg give his wife flowers or something entirely different happened, but the hate was still there. Evidently psychotic, the husband lured him to the area across the street from Union Cemetery and knocked him unconscious, then set him on fire, killing Kellogg. In the days after, he hid away in the basement of the inn, where the dark figure was telling him that his wife was next. Of course, the police found the husband and he was arrested, but he kept speaking as if someone else was in the room. No one's quite sure why exactly he set Kellogg on fire, but he was tried for his crimes and convicted of murder. Up on the hill nearby Union Cemetery lies the remains of a monastery that never was. Monks started laying the foundation to build, but everything went wrong. The foundation was constantly wrong, the roof collapsed, and a fire broke out. Eventually, the monks gave up, leaving their attempted building as is. The remains can still be seen today, but many say the grounds are cursed. The association of this has caused many occult and satanic rituals to take place there, fueling further belief the grounds are indeed cursed and a dark presence abounds. On the tale of Union Cemetery that seems to have two versions is of a body found in the sinkhole from behind the grounds. The story is first told of a lonely man named Brian Walsh. New to the area just after a few months, he came across a beautiful woman in town named Janet Headley. He then immediately became obsessed with Janet, and it quickly turned into stalking. The only problem Walsh had, or so he thought, was Janet was a happily married woman. Walsh's behavior was noted by many in town, and even Janet's husband Sam, who knew of his obsession, but no one did or said anything. He then, driven by obsession and insanity, quickly developed a plan to murder Sam. Strategically leaving Janet alone, he stopped stalking her for about a week and instead focused on Sam. Then one night after work when he should have been home, Sam disappeared. Janet at first thought he was working late, but after midnight her worst fears set in. She then reported him missing to the police, but Sam was nowhere to be found. Walsh had carried out his plan murdering Sam and then using weights tossed him into the sinkhole behind Union Cemetery, where he thought no one would find him. Which under normal circumstances, he most likely would have gotten away with it, but the cursed grounds had other plans of their own. Waking up one morning, going about his routine shaving, Walsh suddenly was overcome with a horrible feeling and froze as a dark figure appeared in his bathroom. Unable to move or scream, he watched as it passed him by and then left as suddenly as it came. Finally able to move, he ran out of his apartment shouting and crying like a madman half-shaven. Of course, believed to be a drunk and obsessed outcast, Walsh was labeled crazy by his landlady and neighbors who didn't believe a word he said. He then unexplainably knew he would be caught. Days later, the police came and arrested Walsh for the murder of Sam Healey, whose body, despite still being weighted down, rose and floated just long enough to be found in the sinkhole. This puzzled everyone involved in the investigation, but one thing was certain: Brian Walsh was guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison, where to this day he still doesn't know how Sam's body floated in the sinkhole, but also wonders why Janet Healey never wrote him back. Some proclaim it was a Victorian woman's body found in the sinkhole, not a man's, but the story lacks sufficient details and isn't concrete as Walsh's tale. Many cemeteries obviously have caretakers who preserve, protect, and keep the grounds tidy. Neil Holden had the honor of being the sexton of Union Cemetery, spending many hours inside Union. In Holden's free time, he spent hiking in the New England countryside. If he couldn't make it out of town, he would hike in the nearby woods behind Union Cemetery, which is where things would change one day for Neil. After an enjoyable sunny day cross-country skiing in winter, he was headed back to Union Cemetery, where he saw an odd sight. A man all dressed in black, appearing as a minister from history books and not of Holden's time, was in his path. Attempting to catch the man, he yelled hello, but got no answer. In fact, it was as if the man didn't hear him at all and proceeded to keep walking up the hill. Picking up pace, Holden decided to catch the man, but he couldn't, which just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished into thin air. Perplexed, Holden couldn't understand why anyone dressed as a historical minister would find himself on a cold wintry slope in the hills in Connecticut. This grew into obsession and losing interest in anything else but attempting to find what he called the Dark Man. Holden finally retold his story to a friend of his, hoping maybe with his help they could both find the Dark Man behind Union Cemetery. Of course, Holden's friend had concerns about what exactly Holden had happening in his life, speaking like a madman about a dark figure in a forest, but agreed to help. After a few journeys into the woods with no sightings, his friends started to have serious doubts if Holden was hallucinating or perhaps a creation from a troubled mind. You see, Holden recently was cured from cancer, and the treatments took a hard toll on his health. The final visit, however, with Holden's friend losing all faith in finding any dark figure, found him, or it, just a few yards from Union Cemetery. Sure enough, it was the exact same figure Holden had seen before. In disbelief, his friend now saw Holden's claims with his own eyes. Close up, the man was younger and dressed in deer skins with a raccoon hat that looked more suitable for a 17th century deer stalker than a minister, as Holden first thought. The two then approached the man, asking him where he was headed. The man spoke English, but more from another era. He told them he was planning to meet some friends in a nearby field. The only problem was the field where he was supposed to be meeting his friends was now the Eastern Reservoir. The young man then started on his way, and both attempted to stop him, but he vanished again without a trace. Holden and his friend were left speechless, with his friend then finding comfort in the paranormal community. For Holden, he didn't take it as well. Becoming disturbed with the encounter, he lost considerable weight and couldn't sleep. His doctor, thinking his cancer returned, ran tests, but nothing was found. Eventually, sadly, Holden took his own life, and on the day of his burial in Union Cemetery, a conservation officer reported seeing a young man in the woods dressed in deerstalker clothes nearby. Many flocked to Union Cemetery hoping to encounter its hauntings and happenings for their own stories. Photographs, videos, and stories now all flood the internet with encounters about Union Cemetery, propelling the cemetery further into notoriety and the paranormal community. The Warrens captured their own evidence that they say was concrete evidence that ghosts do indeed exist. This, of course, has been highly criticized, and some claim just a hoax. Paranormal shows and more have done countless investigations on the grounds, saying they believe Union Cemetery is indeed haunted. Yet if you do find yourself in the New England countryside near Easton, keep in mind there's no trespassing after dark, or you might find yourself talking to the local law enforcement instead of the ghosts. Extremely friendly but understandably strict on protecting their residents, living or dead, it's a job definitely not for the faint of heart, with all its happenings within. Halloween in New England wouldn't be Halloween without a good haunting, and Union Cemetery, in the Grimm's opinion, is the perfect place for just that, and possibly more. The grave grind for Union Cemetery was an iced mocha latte from Greiser's Coffee and Market in Easton, Connecticut. For more honorary grinds in the area, please visit the-grim.com. For now, we're closing the gate on Union Cemetery. We hope you enjoyed our dig into history. If you did, leave us a review wherever we're haunting your podcast queue, or subscribe today to join us next time when we open the gate on the Grim.